Greetings. This is Canto 2 of Book 2 of the poem Savitri by Sri Aurobindo. This is the Kingdom of Subtle Matter. In the impalpable field of secret self, this little outer being's vast support, parted from vision by earth's solid fence, he came into a magic crystal air and found a life that lived not by the flesh, a light that made visible immaterial things, a fine degree in wonder's hierarchy, the kingdom of subtle matter's fairycraft, outlined against a sky of vivid hues, leaping out of a splendor trance and haze, the wizard revelation of its front. A world of lovelier forms lies near to ours, where, undisguised by earth's deforming sight, all shapes are beautiful and all things true. In that lucent ambience, mystically clear, the eyes were doors to a celestial sense. Hearing was music and the touch a charm, and the heart drew a deeper breath of power. There dwell earth nature's shining origins, the perfect plans on which she molds her works, the distant outcomes of her travailing force, repose in a framework of established fate. Attempted vainly now, or won in vain, already were mapped and scheduled there the time and figure of her future sovereignties in the sumptuous lineaments traced by desire. The golden issue of mind's labyrinth plots, the riches unfound or still uncaught by our lives, unsullied by the attaint of mortal thought, abide in that pellucid atmosphere. Our vague beginnings are overtaken there. Our middle term sketched out in prescient lines, our finished ends anticipated live. This brilliant roof of our descending plane, intercepting the free boon of heaven's air, admits small inrushes of a mighty breath, or fragrant circuits through gold lattices. It shields our ceiling of terrestrial mind from deathless suns and the streaming of God's rain, yet canalizes a strange irised glow, and bright dews drip from the immortal sky. A passage for the powers that move our days, occult behind this grosser nature's walls, a gossamer marriage hall of mind with form, is hidden by a tapestry of dreams. Heaven's meanings steal through it as through a veil. Its inner sight sustains this outer scene. A finer consciousness with happier lines. It has a tact our touch cannot attain. A purity of sense we never feel. Its intercession with the eternal ray inspires our transient earth's brief-lived attempts at beauty and the perfect shape of things. In rooms of the young divinity of power, and early play of the eternal child, the embodiments of his outwinging thoughts, laved in a bright everlasting wonder's tints, and lulled by whispers of that lucid air, take dream-hued rest like birds on timeless trees, before they dive to float on earth-time's sea. All that here seems has lovelier semblance there. Whatever our hearts conceive, our heads create, some high original beauty forfeiting, thence exiled here, consents to an earthly tinge. Whatever is here of visible charm and grace, finds there its faultless and immortal lines. All that is beautiful here is there divine. Figures are there undreamed by mortal mind. Bodies that have no earthly counterpart traverse the inner eye's illumined trance, and ravish the heart with their celestial tread, persuading heaven to inhabit that wonder sphere. The future's marvels wander in its gulfs. Things old and new are fashioned in those depths. A carnival of beauty crowds the heights in that magic kingdom of ideal sight. In its antechambers of splendid privacy, matter and soul in conscious union meet, like lovers in a lonely secret place. In the clasp of a passion not yet unfortunate, they join their strength and sweetness and delight, and mingling make the high and low worlds one. Intruder from the formless infinite, daring to break into the unconscious reign, the spirit's leap towards body touches ground. As yet unwrapped in earthly lineaments, already it wears outlasting death and birth, convincing the abyss by heavenly form, a covering of its immortality, alive to the luster of the wearer's rank, fit to endure the rub of change and time. A tissue mixed of the soul's radiant light and matter's substance of sign-burdened force, imagined vainly in our mind's thin air, an abstract phantasm mold of mental make. It feels what earthly bodies cannot feel, and is more real than this grosser frame. After the falling of mortality's cloak, lightened is its weight to heighten its ascent. Refined to the touch of finer environments, it drops old pattern palls of denser stuff, cancels the grip of earth's descending pull, and bears the soul from world to higher world. Till in the naked ether of the peaks, the spirit's simplicity alone is left, the eternal being's first transparent robe. But when it must come back to its mortal load and the hard ensemble of earth's experience, then its return resumes that heavier dress. For long before earth's solid vest was forged by the technique of the atomic void, a lucent envelope of self-disguise was woven round the secret spirit in things. The subtle realms from those bright sheaths are made. This wonder world with all its radiant boon of vision and inviolate happiness, only for expression cares and perfect form. Fair on its peaks it has dangerous nether plains. Its light draws towards the verge of nature's lapse. It lends beauty to the terror of the gulfs, and fascinating eyes to perilous gods. Invests with grace the demon and the snake. Its trance imposes earth's inconscience. Immortal it weaves for us death's somber robe, and authorizes our mortality. This medium serves a greater consciousness, a vessel of its concealed autocracy. In the subtle ground of matter's worlds, it is the immutable in their mutable forms. In the folds of its creative memory, it guards the deathless type of perishing things. Its lowered potencies found our fallen strengths. Its thought invents our reasoned ignorance. Its sense fathers our body's reflexes. Our secret breath of untried mightier force, the lurking sun of an instant's inner sight. Its fine suggestions are a covert fount for our iridescent rich imaginings, touching things common with transfiguring hues. Till even earth's mud grows rich and warm with the skies, and a glory gleams from the soul's decadence. Its knowledge is our error's starting point. Its beauty dons our mud mask ugliness. Its artist good begins our evil's tale. A heaven of creative truths above, a cosmos of harmonious dreams between, a chaos of dissolving forms below. it plunges lost in our inconscient base. Out of its fall our denser matter came. Thus was taken God's plunge into the night. This fallen world became a nurse of souls, inhabited by concealed divinity. A being woke and lived in the meaningless void. A worldwide nescience strove towards life and thought. A consciousness plucked out from mindless sleep. All here is driven by an insentient will. Thus fallen, inconscient, frustrate, dense, inert. Sunk into inanimate and torpid drowse, earth lay, a drudge of sleep, forced to create by a subconscious yearning memory, left from a happiness dead before she was born, an alien wonder on her senseless breast. This mire must harbor the orchid and the rose. From her blind, unwilling substance must emerge a beauty that belongs to happier spheres. This is the destiny bequeathed to her, as if a slain god left a golden trust to a blind force and an imprisoned soul. As if. An immortal's godhead's perishable parts she must reconstitute from fragments lost, reword from a document complete elsewhere, her doubtful title to her divine name. A residue her sole inheritance, all things she carries in her shapeless dust. Her giant energy tied to petty forms, in the slow tentative motion of her power, with only frail blunt instruments for use, she has accepted as her nature's need, and given to man as his stupendous work, a labor to the gods impossible. A life living hardly in a field of death, its portion claims of immortality. A brute half-conscious body serves as means, a mind that must recover a knowledge lost, held in stone grip by the world's inconscience, and wearing still these countless knots of law, a spirit bound stand up as nature's king. A mighty kinship is this daring's cause. All we attempt in this imperfect world looks forward or looks back beyond time's gloss, to its pure idea and firm inviolate type in an absolute creation's flawless skill. To seize the absolute in shapes that pass, to fix the eternal's touch in time-made things, this is the law of all perfection here. A fragment here is caught of heaven's design, else could we never hope for greater life, and ecstasy and glory could not be. Even in the littleness of our mortal state, even in this prison house of our outer form, a brilliant passage for the ineffable flame, the infallible flame, is driven through gross walls of nerve and brain. A splendor presses or a power breaks through. Earth's great dull barrier is removed a while. The inconscient seal is lifted from our eyes, and we grow vessels of creative might. The enthusiasm of a divine surprise pervades our life. A mystic stir is felt. A joyful anguish trembles in our limbs. A dream of beauty dances through the heart. A thought from the eternal mind draws near, intimations cast from the invisible. Awaking from infinity's sleep come down, symbols of that which never yet was made. But soon the inert flesh responds no more, then sinks the sacred orgy of delight. The blaze of passion and the tide of power are taken from us, and, though a glowing form abides astonishing earth, imagined supreme, too little of what was meant has left a trace. Earth's eyes half see, her forces half create. Her rarest works are copies of heaven's art. A radiance of a golden artifice, a masterpiece of inspired device and rule. Her forms hide what they house and only mime, the unseized miracle of self-born shapes that live forever in the eternal's gaze. Here in a difficult, half-finished world, in a slow toiling of unconscious powers, here is man's ignorant divining mind, his genius born from an inconscient soil. To copy on earth's copies is his art. For when he strives for things surpassing earth, too rude the workman's tools, too crude his stuff, and hardly with his heart's blood he achieves his transient house of the divine idea, his figure of a Timon for the unborn. Our being thrills with high far memories, and would bring down their dateless meanings here, but, too divine for earthly nature's scheme, beyond our reach the eternal marvels blaze. Absolute they dwell, unborn, immutable, immaculate in the spirit's deathless air, immortal in a world of motionless time, and an unchanging muse of deep self-space. Only when we have climbed above ourselves, a line of the transcendent meets our road and joins us to the timeless and the true. It brings to us the inevitable word, the godlike act, the thoughts that never die. A ripple of light and glory wraps the brain, and traveling down the moment's vanishing route, the figures of eternity arrive. As the mind's visitors or the heart's guests, they espouse our mortal brevity a while, or seldom in some rare delivering glimpse, are caught by our vision's delicate surmise. Although beginnings only and first attempts, these glimmerings point to the secret of our birth and the hidden miracle of our destiny. What we are there and here on earth shall be is imagined in a contact and a call. As yet, earth's imperfection is our sphere. Our nature's glass shows not our real self. The greatness still abides, held back within. Earth's doubting future hides our heritage. The light now distant shall grow native here. The strength that visits us our comrade power. The ineffable shall find a secret voice. The imperishable burn through matter's screen, making this mortal body Godhead's robe. The Spirit's greatness is our timeless source, and it shall be our crown in endless time. A vast unknown is round us and within. All things are wrapped in the dynamic one. A subtle link of union joins all life. Thus all creation is a single chain. We are not left alone in a closed scheme between a driving of inconscient force and an incommunicable absolute. Our life is a spur in a sublime soul range. Our being looks beyond its walls of mind, and it communicates with greater worlds. There are brighter earths and wider heavens than ours. There are realms where being broods in its own depths. It feels in its immense dynamic core its nameless, unformed, unborn potencies cry for expression in the unshaped vast. Ineffable beyond ignorance and death, the images of its everlasting truth look out from a chamber of its self-wrapped soul. As if to its own inner witness gaze, the Spirit holds up its mirrored self and works, the power and passion of its timeless heart, the figures of its formless ecstasy, the grandeurs of its multitudinous might. Thence comes the mystic substance of our souls, into the prodigy of our nature's birth. There is the unfallen height of all we are, and dateless fount of all we hope to be. On every plane the hieratic power Initiate of unspoken verities, dreams to transcribe and make a part of life, in its own native style and living tongue, some trait of the perfection of the unborn, some vision seen in the omniscient light, some far tone of the immortal rhapsodic voice, some rapture of the all-creating bliss, some form and plan of the beauty unutterable. Worlds are there nearer to those absolute realms, where the response to truth is swift and sure, and spirit is not hampered by its frame, or hearts by sharp divisions seized and rent, and delight and beauty are inhabitants, and love and sweetness are the law of life. A finer substance in a subtler mold embodies the divinity earth but dreams. Its strength can overtake joy's running feet. Overleaping the fixed hurdle set by time, the rapid net of an intuitive clasp captures the fugitive happiness we desire. A nature lifted by a larger breath, plastic and passive to the all-shaping fire, answers the flaming Godhead's casual touch. Immune from our inertia of response, it hears the word to which our hearts are deaf, adopts the seeing of immortal eyes, and, traveler on the roads of line and hue, pursues the spirit of beauty to its home. Thus we draw near to the all-wonderful, following his rapture in things as sign and guide. Beauty is his footprint showing us where he has passed. Love is his heartbeat's rhythm in mortal breasts. Happiness is the smile on his adorable face. A communion of spiritual entities, a genius of creative immanence, makes all creation deeply intimate. A fourth dimension of aesthetic sense, where all is in ourselves, ourselves in all. To the cosmic wideness realigns our souls. A kindling rapture joins the seer and seen. The craftsman and the craft grown inly one achieve perfection by the magic throb and passion of their close identity. All that we slowly piece from gathered parts, or by long labor stumblingly evolve, is there self-born by its eternal right. In us too the intuitive fire can burn. An agent light, it is coiled in our folded hearts. On the celestial levels is its home. Descending, it can bring those heavens here. But rarely burns the flame, nor burns for long. The joy it calls from those diviner heights brings brief, magnificent reminiscences. And high splendid glimpses of interpreting thought, but not the utter vision and delight. A veil is kept, something is still held back, lest, captive of the beauty and the joy, our souls forget to the highest to aspire. In that fair settled realm behind our own, the form is all, and physical gods are kings. The inspiring light plays in fine boundaries. A faultless beauty comes by nature's grace. There liberty is perfection's guarantee. Although the absolute image lacks, the word incarnate, the sheer spiritual ecstasy, all is a miracle of symmetric charm, a fantasy of perfect line and rule. There all feel satisfied in themselves and whole. A rich completeness is by limit made. Marvel in an utter littleness abounds. An intricate rapture riots in a small space. Each rhythm is kin to its environment. Each line is perfect and inevitable. Each object faultlessly built for charm and use. All is enamored of its own delight. Intact it lives of its perfection sure. In a heaven-pleased, self-glad immunity, content to be, it has need of nothing more. Here was not futile effort's broken heart, exempt from the ordeal and the test, empty of opposition and of pain. It was a world that could not fear nor grieve. It had no grace of error or defeat. It had no room for fault, no power to fail. Out of some packed self-bliss it drew at once its form discoveries of the mute idea, and the miracle of its rhythmic thoughts and acts, its clear technique of firm and rounded lives. Its gracious people of inanimate shapes and glory of breathing bodies like our own. Amazed, his senses ravished with delight, he moved in a divine yet kindred world, admiring marvelous forms so near to ours, yet perfect like the playthings of a god, deathless in the aspect of mortality. In their narrow and exclusive absolutes, the finite's rank supremacies throned abide. It dreams not ever of what might have been. Only in boundaries can this absolute live. In a supremeness bound to its own plan, where all was finished and no widths were left, no space for shadows of the immeasurable, no room for the incalculable surprise, a captive of its own beauty and ecstasy. In a magic circle wrought the enchanted might. The spirit stood back effaced behind its frame, admired for the bright finality of its lines. A blue horizon limited the soul. Thought moved in luminous facilities. The outer ideal shallows its swim range. Life in boundaries lingered satisfied with the small happiness of the body's acts. Assigned as force to a bound corner mind, attached to the safe paucity of her room, she did her little works and played and slept and thought not of a greater work undone. Forgetful of her violent vast desires, forgetful of the heights to which she rose, her walk was fixed within a radiant groove. The beautiful body of a soul at ease, like one who laughs in sweet and sunlit groves, childlike she swung in her gold cradle of joy. The spacious call reached not her charmed abode. She had no wings for wide and dangerous flight. She faced no peril of sky or of abyss. She knew no vistas and no mighty dreams, no yearning for her lost infinitudes. A perfect picture in a perfect frame, this fairy artistry could not keep his will. Only a moment's fine release it gave. A careless hour was spent in a slight bliss. Our spirit tires of being surfaces. Transcended is the splendor of the form. It turns to hidden powers and deeper states. So now he looked beyond for greater light. His soul's peak climb abandoning in its rear this brilliant courtyard of the house of days, he left that fine material paradise. His destiny lay beyond in larger space. This is the end of Canto 2. Canto 3, The Glory and the Fall of Life. An uneven broad ascent now lured his feet. Answering a greater nature's troubled call, he crossed the limits of embodied mind and entered wide, obscure, disputed fields, where all was doubt and change and nothing sure, a world of search and toil without repose. As one who meets the face of the unknown, a questioner with none to give reply, attracted to a problem never solved, always uncertain on the ground he trod, always drawn to an inconstant goal. He traveled through a land peopled by doubts, in shifting confines on a quaking base. In front he saw a boundary ever unreached, and thought himself at each step nearer now. A far retreating horizon of mirage. A vagrancy was there that brooked no home, a journey of countless paths without a close. Nothing he found to satisfy his heart. A tireless wandering, sought and could not cease. There life is the manifest incalculable, a movement of the unquiet seas, a long and venturous leap of spirit into space, a vexed disturbance in the eternal calm, an impulse and passion of the infinite. Assuming whatever shape her fancy wills, escaped from the restraint of settled forms, she has left the safety of the tried and the known, unshepherded by the fear that walks through time, undaunted by fate that dogs and chance that springs. She accepts disaster as a common risk. Careless of suffering, heedless of sin and fall, she wrestles with danger and discovery in the unexplored expanses of the soul. To be seemed only a long experiment, the hazard of a seeking ignorant force that tries all truths and, finding none supreme, moves on unsatisfied, unsure of its end. As saw some inner mind, so life was shaped. From thought to thought she passed, from phase to phase, tortured by her own powers, or proud and blessed, now master of herself, now toy and slave. A huge inconsequence was her action's law, as if all possibility must be drained, and anguish and bliss were pastimes of the heart. In a gallop of thunder-hooved vicissitudes, she swept through the race fields of circumstance, or, swaying, she tossed between her heights and deeps, uplifted or broken on time's inconstant wheel. Amid a tedious crawl of drab desires, she writhed, a worm mid worms in nature's mud, then, Titan-statured, took all earth for food. Ambition the seas for robe, for crowns the stars, and shouting strode from peak to giant peak, clamoring for worlds to conquer and to rule. Then, wantonly enamored of sorrow's face, she plunged into the anguish of the depths, and, wallowing, clung to her own misery. In dolorous converse with her squandered self, she wrote the account of all that she had lost, or sat with grief as with an ancient friend. A romp of violent rapture soon was spent, or she lingered tied to an inadequate joy, missing the turns of fate, missing life's goal. A scene was planned for all her numberless moods, where each could be the law and way of life, but none could offer a pure felicity. Only a flickering zest they left behind, or the fierce lust that brings a dead fatigue. Amid her swift, untold variety, something remained dissatisfied, ever the same, and in the new saw only a face of the old. For every hour repeated all the rest, and every change prolonged the same unease. A spirit of herself and aim unsure, tired soon of too much joy and happiness. She needs the spur of pleasure and of pain, and the native taste of suffering and unrest. She strains for an end that never can she win. A perverse savor haunts her thirsting lips. For the grief she weeps, which came from her own choice, for the pleasure yearns that racked with wounds her breast. Aspiring to heaven, she turns her steps towards hell. Chance she has chosen and danger for playfellows. Fate's dreadful swing she has taken, 4. Cradle and seat, yet pure and bright from the timeless was her birth. A lost world rapture lingers in her eyes. Her moods are faces of the infinite. Beauty and happiness are her native right, and endless bliss is her eternal home. This now revealed its antique face of joy, a sudden disclosure to the heart of grief, tempting it to endure and long and hope. Even in changing worlds bereft of peace, in an air racked with sorrow and with fear, and while his feet trod on a soil unsafe, he saw the image of a happier state. In an architecture of hieratic space, circling and mounting towards creation's tops, at a blue height which never was too high, for warm communion between body and soul, as far as heaven, as near as thought and hope. Glimmered the kingdoms of a griefless life. Above him in a new celestial vault, other than the heavens beheld by mortal eyes, as on a fretted ceiling of the gods, an archipelago of laughter and fire, swam stars apart in a rippled sea of sky. Towered spirals, magic rings of vivid hue, and gleaming spheres of strange felicity floated through distance like a symbol world. On the trouble and the toil they could not share, on the unhappiness they could not aid, impervious to life's suffering, struggle, grief, untarnished by its anger, gloom, and hate, unmoved, untouched, looked down great visioned plains, blissful forever in their timeless right. Absorbed in their own beauty and contentment, of their immortal gladness they live sure. Apart in their self-glory plunged, remote, burning they swam in a vague lucent haze. An everlasting refuge of dreamlight, a nebula of the splendors of the gods, made from the musings of eternity. Almost unbelievable by human faith, hardly they seem the stuff of things that are. As through a magic television's glass, outlined to some magnifying inner eye, they shone like images thrown from a far scene, too high and glad for mortal lids to seize. But near and real to the longing heart, and to the body's passionate thought and sense, are the hidden kingdoms of beatitude. In some close, unattained realm which yet we feel, immune from the harsh clutch of death and time, escaping the search of sorrow and desire, in bright, enchanted, safe peripheries, forever wallowing in bliss they lie. In dream and trance and muse before our eyes, across the subtle vision's inner field, wide rapturous landscapes fleeting from the sight, the figures of the perfect kingdom pass, and behind them leave a shining memory's trail. Imagined scenes or great eternal worlds, dream-caught or sensed, they touch our hearts with their delight. Unreal seeming, yet more real than life, happier than happiness, truer than things true. If dreams these were, or captured images, dreams truths made earth's vain realities false, in a swift eternal moment fixed there live, or ever recalled come back to longing eyes, calm heavens of imperishable light, illumined continents of violet peace, oceans and rivers of the mirth of God, and griefless countries under purple suns. This, once a star of bright remote idea, or imagination's comet trail of dream, took now a close shape of reality. The gulf between dream truth, earth fact was crossed. The wonder worlds of life were dreams no more. His vision made all they unveiled its own. Their scenes, their happenings met his eyes and heart, and smote them with pure loveliness and bliss. A breathless summit region drew his gaze, whose boundaries jutted into a sky of self, and dipped towards a strange ethereal base. The quintessence glowed of life's supreme delight. On a spiritual and mysterious peak, only a miracle's high transfiguring line divided life from the formless infinite, and sheltered time against eternity. Out of that formless stuff time mints his shapes. The eternal's quiet holds the cosmic act. The protean images of the world force have drawn the strength to be, the will to last, from a deep ocean of dynamic peace. Inverting the spirit's apex towards life, she spent the plastic liberties of the one to cast in acts the dreams of her caprice. His wisdom's call steadied her careless feet. He props her dance upon a rigid base. His timeless still immutability must standardize her creation's miracle. Out of the void's unseeing energies, inventing the scene of a concrete universe, by his thoughts she has fixed its paces. In its blind acts she sees by flashes of his all-knowing light. At her will the inscrutable supermind leans down to guide her force that feels but cannot know. Its breath of power controls her restless seas, and life obeys the governing idea. At her will, led by a luminous immanence, the hazardous experimenting mind pushes its way through obscure possibilities, mid chance formations of an unknowing world. Our human ignorance moves towards the truth, that nescience may become omniscient, transmuted instinct shaped to divine thoughts, thoughts house infallible immortal sight, and nature climb towards God's identity. The master of the world self-made her slave, in the executor of her fantasies, is the executor of her fantasies. She has canalized the seas of omnipotence. She has limited by her laws the illimitable. The immortal bound himself to do her works. He labors at the task her ignorance sets. Hidden is the cape of our mortality. The worlds, the forms her goddess fancy makes, have lost their origin or unseen heights. Have lost their origin on unseen heights. Even severed, straying from their timeless source, even deformed, obscure, accursed and fallen, since even fall has its perverted joy, and nothing she leaves out that serves delight. These two can to the peaks revert, or here cut out the sentence of the spirit's fall, recover their forfeited divinity. At once caught in an eternal vision sweep, he saw her pride and splendor of highborn zones, and her regions crouching in the nether deeps. Above was a monarchy of unfallen self, beneath was the gloomy trance of the abyss, an opposite pole or dim antipodes. There were vast of the glory of life's absolutes. All laughed in a safe immortality, and an eternal childhood of the soul before darkness came and pain and grief were born, where all could dare to be themselves. And one. And wisdom played in sinless innocence with naked freedom in truth's happy sun. There were worlds of her laughter and dreadful irony. There were fields of her taste of toil and strife and tears. Her head lay on the breast of amorous death. Sleep imitated a while extinction's peace. The light of God she had parted from his dark to test the savor of bare opposites. Her mingling in man's heart, their tones and hues have woven his being's mutable design, his life a forward rippling stream in time, his nature's constant fixed mobility, his soul a moving picture's changeful film, his cosmos chaos of personality. The grand creatrix with her cryptic touch has turned to pathos and power being's self-dream, made a passion play of its fathomless mystery. But here were worlds lifted halfway to heaven. The veil was not there, the veil was there, but not the shadowy wall. In forms not too remote from human grasp, some passion of the inviolate purity broke through, a ray of the original bliss. Heaven's joys might have been earth's if earth were pure. There could have reached our divinized sense and heart some natural felicity's bright extreme, some thrill of supernature's absolutes. All strengths could laugh and sport on earth's hard roads, and never feel her cruel edge of pain. All love could play and nowhere nature's shame. But she has stabled her dreams in matter's courts, and still her doors are barred to things supreme. These worlds could feel God's breath visiting their tops. Some glimmer of the transcendence hem was there. Across the white aeonic silences, immortal figures of embodied joy traversed wide spaces near to eternity's sleep. Pure mystic voices in beatitude's hush appealed to love's immaculate sweetnesses, calling his honeyed touch to thrill the worlds, his blissful hands to seize on nature's limbs, his sweet intolerant might of union to take all beings into his Savior arms, drawing to his pity the rebel and the waif, to force on them the happiness they refuse. A chant hymnal to the unseen divine, a flaming rhapsody of white desire lured an immortal music into the heart and woke the slumbering ear of ecstasy. A purer, fierier sense had there its home, a burning urge no earthly limbs can hold. One drew a large, unburdened, spacious breath, and the heart sped from beat to rapturous beat. The voice of time sang to the immortal's joy. An inspiration and a lyric cry, the moments came with ecstasy on their wings. Beauty unimaginable moved heaven bare, absolved from boundaries in the vasts of dreams. The cry of the birds of wonder called from the skies to the deathless people of the shores of light. Creation leaped straight from the hands of God. Marvel and rapture wandered in the ways. Only to be was a supreme delight. Life was a happy laughter of the soul, and joy was king with love for minister. The Spirit's luminescence was bodied there. The Spirit's luminousness was bodied there. Life's contraries were lovers or natural friends, and her extremes keen edges of harmony. Indulgence with a tender purity came, and nursed the God on her maternal breast. There none was weak, so falsehood could not live. Ignorance was a thin shade protecting light. Imagination the free will of truth. Pleasure a candidate for heaven's fire. The intellect was beauty's worshipper. Strength was the slave of calm spiritual law. Power laid its head upon the breasts of bliss. There were summit glories inconceivable, autonomies of wisdom's still self-rule, and high dependencies of her virgin son. Illumined theocracies of the seeing soul throned in the power of the transcendence ray. A vision of grandeurs, a dream of magnitudes in sun-bright kingdoms moved with regal gait. Assemblies, crowded senates of the gods, life's puissances reigned on seats of marble will. High dominations and autocracies, and laureled strengths and armed imperative mights. All objects there were great and beautiful. All beings wore a royal stamp of power. There sat the oligarchies of natural law. Proud, violent heads served one calm monarch brow. All the soul's postures donned divinity. There met the ardent mutual intimacies of master's joy and the joy of servitude, imposed by love on love's heart that obeys, and love's body held beneath a rapturous yoke. All was a game of meeting kingliness. For worship lifts the worshipper's bowed strength, close to the God's pride and bliss his soul adores. The ruler there is one with all he rules. To him who serves with a free equal heart, obedience is his princely training's school. His nobility's coronet and privilege, his faith is a high nature's idiom, his service a spiritual sovereignty. There were realms where knowledge joined creative power in her high home and made her all his own. The grand illuminate seized her gleaming limbs and filled them with the passion of his ray, till all her body was its transparent house, and all her soul a counterpart of his soul. Apotheosized, transfigured by wisdom's touch, her days became a luminous sacrifice. An immortal moth in happy and endless fire, she burned in his sweet, intolerant blaze. A captive life wedded her conqueror. In his wide sky she built her world anew. She gave to mind's calm pace the motor's speed, to thinking a need to live what the soul saw, to living an impetus to know and see. His splendor grasped her, her puissance to him clung. She crowned the idea a king in purple robes, put her magic serpent scepter in thought's grip, made forms his inward vision's rhythmic shapes, and her acts the living body of his will. A flaming thunder, a creator flash, his victor light rode on her deathless force. A centaur's mighty gallop bore the god. Life throned with mind, a double majesty. Worlds were there of a happiness great and grave, and action tinged with dream, laughter with thought, and passion there could wait for its desire until it heard the near approach of God. Worlds were there of a childlike mirth and joy, a carefree youthfulness of mind and heart, found in the body a heavenly instrument. It lit an aureate halo round desire, and freed the deified animal in the limbs to divine gambols of love and beauty and bliss. On a radiant soil that gazed at heaven's smile, a swift life impulse stinted not nor stopped. It knew not how to tire, happy were its tears. There work was play, and play the only work. The task of heaven a game of godlike might. A celestial bacchanal forever pure, unstayed by faintness as in mortal frames, life was an eternity of rapture's moods. Age never came, care never lined the face. Imposing on the safety of the stars a race and laughter of immortal strengths, the nude godchildren their playfield ran, smiting the winds with splendor and with speed. Of storm and sun they made companions, sporting with the white mane of tossing seas, slew distance trampled to death under their wheels, and wrestled in the arenas of their force. Imperious in their radiance like the suns, they kindled heaven with the glory of their limbs, flung like a divine largesse to the world, a spell to force the heart to stark delight. They carried the pride and mastery of their charm. As if life's banner on the roads of space, ideas were luminous comrades of the soul. Mind played with speech, cast javelins of thought, but needed not these instruments toil to know. Knowledge was nature's pastime like the rest, investitured with the fresh heart's bright ray, and early God instincts child inheritors, tenants of the perpetuity of time. Still thrilling with the first creation's bliss, they steeped existence in the youth of soul. An exquisite and vehement tyranny, the strong compulsion of their will to joy, poured smiling streams of happiness through the world. There reigned a breath of high immune contentment, a fortunate gate of days in tranquil air, a flood of universal love and peace. A sovereignty of tireless sweetness lived, like a song of pleasure on the lips of time. A large spontaneous order freed the will. A sun-frank winging of the soul to bliss, the breadth and greatness of the unfettered act, and the swift fire-heart's golden liberty. There was no falsehood of soul severance. There came no crookedness of thought or word to rob creation of its native truth. All was sincerity and natural force. Their freedom was sole rule and highest law. In a happy series climbed or plunged these worlds, in realms of curious beauty and surprise, in fields of grandeur and of Titan power. Life played at ease with her immense desires. 1,000 Edens she could build nor pause. No bound was set to her greatness and to her grace, and to her heavenly variety. Awake with a cry and stir of numberless souls, arisen from the breast of some deep infinite. Smiling like a newborn child at love and hope, in her nature housing the immortal's power, in her bosom bearing the eternal will. No guide she needed but her luminous heart. No fall debased the godhead of her steps. No alien night had come to blind her eyes. There was no use for grudging ring or fence. Each act was a perfection and a joy. Abandoned to her rapid fancy's moods and the rich colored riot of her mind, initiate of divine and mighty dreams, magician builder of unnumbered forms, exploring the measures of the rhythms of God, at will she wove her wizard wonder dance, a Dionysian goddess of delight, a bacchante of creative ecstasy. This world of bliss he saw and felt its call, but found no way to enter into its joy. Across the conscious gulf there was no bridge. A darker air encircled still his soul, tied to an image of unquiet life. In spite of yearning mind and longing sense, to a sad thought by gray experience formed, and a vision dimmed by care and sorrow and sleep, all this seemed only a bright desirable dream, conceived in a longing distance by the heart of one who walks in the shadow of earth pain. Although he once had felt the eternal's clasp, too near to suffering worlds his nature lived, and where he stood were entrances of night. Hardly, too close beset by the world's care, can the dense mold in which we have been made return sheer joy to joy, pure light to light. For its tormented will to think and live, first to a mingled pain and pleasure woke. and still it keeps the habit of its birth. A dire duality is our way to be. In the crude beginnings of this mortal world, life was not nor mind's play nor heart's desire. When earth was built in the unconscious void, and nothing was save a material scene, identified with sea and sky and stone, her young gods yearned for the release of souls asleep in objects, vague, inanimate. In that desolate grandeur, in that beauty bare, in the deaf stillness mid the unheeded sounds, heavy was the uncommunicated load of Godhead in a world that had no needs, for none was there to feel or to receive. This solid mass which brooked no throb of sense could not contain their vast creative urge. Immersed no more in matter's harmony, the spirit lost its statuesque repose. In the uncaring trance it groped for sight. Passion for the movements of a conscious heart, famishing for speech and thought and joy and love, in the dumb insensitive wheeling day and night, hungered for the beat of yearning and repose. The poised inconscience shaken with a touch, the intuitive silence trembling with a name, they cried to life to invade the senseless mold, and in the brute forms awake divinity. A voice was heard on the mute rolling globe, a murmur moaned in the unlistening void. A being seemed to breathe where once was none, something pent up in dead insentient depths, denied conscious existence, lost to joy, turned as if one asleep since dateless time. Aware of its own buried reality, remembering its forgotten self and right, it yearned to know, to inspire, to enjoy, to live. Life heard the call and left her native light. Overflowing from her bright, magnificent plane on the rigid coil and sprawl of mortal space, here too the gracious, great-winged angel poured her splendor and her swiftness and her bliss, hoping to fill a fair new world with joy. As comes a goddess to a mortal's breast, and fills his days with her celestial clasp, she stooped to make her home in transient shapes. In matter's womb she cast the immortal's fire. In the unfeeling vast woke thought and hope, smote with her charm and beauty flesh and nerve, and forced delight on earth's insensible frame. Alive and clad with trees and herbs and flowers, earth's great brown body smiled toward the skies. Azure replied to azure in the sea's laugh. New sentient creatures filled the unseen depths. Life's glory and swiftness ran in the beauty of beasts. Man dared and thought and met with his soul the world. But while the magic breath was on its way, before her gifts could reach our prisoned hearts, a dark, ambiguous presence questioned all. The secret will that robes itself with night and offers to spirit the ordeal of the flesh, imposed a mystic mask of death and pain. In turn now in the slow and suffering years sojourns the winged and wonderful wayfarer, and can no more recall her happier state, but must obey the inert inconscience law, insensible foundation of a world in which blind limits are on beauty laid, and sorrow and joy as struggling comrades live. A dim and dreadful muteness fell on her. Abolished was her subtle mighty spirit, and slain her boon of child-god happiness, and all her glory into littleness turned, and all her sweetness into a maimed desire. To feed death with her works is her life's doom. So veiled was her immortality that she seemed, inflicting consciousness on unconscious things, an episode in an eternal death, a myth of being that must forever cease. Such was the evil mystery of her change. That is the end of Canto 3 of Book 2. This is the end of video number 5 of the poem Savitri by Sri Aurobindo.